Pitt knocks out Florida State down in Tallahassee, getting their 11th conference win. Going to talk about it today on this episode of Locked On Pitt.
You are Locked On Pitt, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Panthers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Pitt podcast. Everybody's always, I'm your host, Nick Fairbon. Today, I'm joined by someone very special, Noah Hiles from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette down there in Tallahassee, man. First of all, how is Tallahassee?
It's good. I mean, thanks for having me on, Nick. I wouldn't call myself very special. Maybe I'm a little special, but not very. But no, Tallahassee's great. Really cool campus. Love the. We were talking before we started recording. Just a great layout down here. Makes me think twice about why I went to college in Ohio. But nonetheless, really, really cool place.
The real question I have is: there a Dave and Buster's anywhere nearby?
If there is, I haven't found it yet. And If there is a Dave & Buster's in Tallahassee, I got bad news for them this evening because I got nothing but free time and money to spend and records to break on Guitar Hero there.
You have no idea Noah just kills Dave & Buster's, but we had a basketball game today go on down there in Tallahassee. You were in attendance. I watched it from my gorgeous television here in Pittsburgh, but no, I'll tell you what, Pitt, 83-75 win. Maybe I don't think the box score completely reflects how easy it was. I don't think it was very easy for Pitt. But just give me your takeaways from this game, from press conferences, anything that you kind of have just on your mind about this game.
Yeah, I think, and I kind of thought this after the Georgia Tech win too. I think it's important to be able to win ugly, and when you're a good team, when things aren't going your way, you need to be able to grind out a win against an inferior opponent on the road. And Pitt did that. It's done that numerous times this season, and it did it tonight. Or today, I shouldn't say tonight. But, they came out, I think, they started 4 of 6 from 3. And then I think they made 2 of their next 15 shots from behind the arc. So that the game tempo, the strategy there kind of flipped. And they were able to adjust. I think the turning point of this game was clearly right after FSU took the lead. They relied on Burton and Sabandi to really get the team going. Nike scored, I think, 8 points in 2 minutes. Jamarius hit a couple of big shots as well. Pitt got the lead back, and that was all she wrote. And that really speaks a lot about this group, where even when its A game isn't on, like this was by far not the best Pitt basketball has looked this year, but they could still regroup, not get overwhelmed, and rise in the moment. And that's what you have with a team full of veterans. That's what you have when you have, the scoring depth that the Panthers possess, when you have 5-6 guys who can go off for 10 to 20 points every single night. And yeah, it was just it's a solid win. It wasn't a pretty win, but it's payback against a team that beat you. It's 5 straight wins. It's 11 conference wins now, and it's keeping them in first place in the ACC.
Yeah, kind of what I kind of took away from this game was actually I thought this was very similar in a lot of ways to almost the NC State win. Now, that was a more complete win, but I remember that game where, Terquavion Smith would make maybe a big shot and they would start to go on a run, but Pitt would just keep punching back. NC State never got a run in that game. Florida State never went on a true run in this game. Every time that they would come back, and even when they took the lead at one point, Pitt was like, okay, we're cool here. Like, this isn't actually anything bad. I thought that was huge because last time they lost, Florida State went on a huge run in the first half, and Pitt was down by double digits at halftime. And I think this is something that Pitt has kind of been able to do a lot recently, is kind of keep the runs down. Like Florida, North Carolina really never got too far out of reach of Pitt when they went on the road in that game. Neither did Wake Forest. I think they've kind of been able to make runs, and if the runs are happening, it's Pitt making the runs. Pitt's had a lot of, one of my favorite stats right now is the kill shot, where you kind of get those 10-0 runs in the second half. Pitt's been able to get a lot of those 10-0 runs in the second half this year. That's why they've won a lot of these key games, and I feel like in this game, you never really had a key run by Florida State. Pitt kept them at bay just enough throughout the game, and then when the run finally came, it was Pitt that did it late in the game to really close the store. I think that Blake Hinson 3 late in the game kind of says it all. Like, this is a guy that had 0 points in the second half, had 4 fouls, and was very clearly frustrated. 0 of 7 in the second half, 0 of 5 from 3 in the second half, and he just drills that 3 to put them up 9. Like, that's the type of team I think this is. They're a veteran, unselfish group, and I think that is actually kind of indicative of why they are 11-3 in the conference right now. And when we're talking about the NCAA tournament resume, I kind of said this, they built their resume already. Now it's solidifying it. No more quarter 3, no more quadrant 3, no more quadrant 4 losses. And they have a lot of those games left on the schedule. They don't need one of those. And that's why I think this game was so big. Just winning ugly, winning a little bit different from their traditional formula. I thought that was what was most impressive about this win against a team that you really don't match up well against.
Yeah, I mean, when you're a team that's competing for a conference championship, these are games you're supposed to win. And I'm not going to say it's easy to win at home over ranked opponents, but it's easy to get up for those games. It's easy to understand the significance of, when Miami or Virginia Tech or Virginia, excuse me, not Virginia Tech, when Miami or Virginia or North Carolina are playing in your building. It's easy to be motivated there. But Pitt has a lot of trap games remaining on its schedule, and you need to win those two. You can't just come out flat against a team, especially a team that's already beat you. And yeah, I think you said a lot of great points, Nick. It's just this team continues to find different ways to win. An analogy that Jamarius Burton always brings up, along with other players, they look at the game as 10 4-round fights, because you have the media breaks and everything in between. And they talk about trying to win the majority of those 10 rounds. And JB said on today's win, it was round 8, where that's where Blake's knockout punch was delivered. And it doesn't matter when that winning round occurs. Some games, I mean, Louisville was like round 2. They just got up and they coasted. And there's other games where that knockout punch doesn't happen until like round 10, like we saw against Miami. But overall, it's the ability to compartmentalize. Hey, you know what? They won that round. Let's recover. We can respond. It's another break. It's another break. Let's regroup. Let's keep getting after it. And it's just really, really, really impressive how nothing really seems to phase this team. Something I was thinking about during the game was, we saw Pitt full court press a little bit today against Florida State. We don't see that often. And the reason we don't see that often is this team is very rarely losing by a significant margin in the second half. Like, I mean, they're sometimes they're down by like 10 with like 10 minutes to go or something, but it's never gotten to a point where they're desperate and they need to start really playing aggressive and forcing mistakes. They've just always been able to really play their game, really since, December, when this team hit its stride, and just things like that. It stands out, and it really speaks to the legitimacy of the run that Pitt's on right now.
It really does. And I think, we talked about this team in totality, how, there is the kind of the wheel that kind of churns everything, I think, is Jamarius Burton. But
yeah,
he's not always the guy that is kind of the wheel to a game. Nike Sabandi put it into high gear after, quite honestly, having a terrible game before his run. He was very, very bad in this game prior to that. And then he pretty much helped clinch this one. When no one else was hot on the floor, it was Nike Sabandi who scored 8 points in that blink of an eye. And that's something that I think differentiates this team even from other teams Jeff Capel's had, right? He's had good players like a Xavier Johnson and Justin Champagne, Audis Toney, Trey McGowan's, John Hugley. All those teams have had good players. They've never had this many guys that can score in bunches when other guys aren't having good games. Because in the past, you would rely on a Champagne to always have his game. But he wasn't going to always have his game. So if JB has an off night, Greg Elliott has an off night, Nelly Cummings has an off night, Nike Sabandi, Blake Hinson, you go on, it can be anyone. And I thought, I want to shout this guy out because I want to talk about his contributions with you. We have to talk about Fede Federico. This guy just had an unreal game today. His ability to get those tough rebounds on the offensive boards were so huge today, because you look at why Pitt won this game, and just as important as anything, they got 20 second chance points today. And Fede Federico, most of his rebounds came on the offensive end. 7 offensive boards for Federico today. I thought he played absolutely spectacular. I can't recall a player for Pitt at least in recent memory, certainly under Capel's tenure, that has just gone like this all year. Consistently from when he took the starting reins over to now, he's just been so good. He's gotten so much better. Fede Federico is like the unheralded hero of this team.
Yeah, and it's even more impressive considering how it happened. I mean, the best player on this team entering this season was John Hugley. And Fede, out of all of the new acquisitions, was supposed to be like the least important piece. You know, it was going to be him and the Diaz-Graham twins coming off the bench and learning. And Fede was supposed to be a 10 to 15 minutes guy. Essentially, he was supposed to be what Guillermo is right now. And, you know, right in the beginning of ACC play, Pitt just kind of says, hey, you're the guy. You're our big man now. If you get in foul trouble, we got to rely on the twins who aren't really physically ready to play 10, 15, 20 minutes down low in this conference. So he was just given an incredibly important role with not a lot of support behind him. And not only did he hold down the fort, like you said, Nick, he gets better every game. And it doesn't show up in his scoring. And that's kind of good, because if Fede Federico is scoring a lot of points, that means Pitt's not playing the way it's built to play. This team isn't built to have a big man, you know, get 15 to 20 touches with his back against the basket and you know, make plays in the post. It wants to it needs to play an up-tempo game, you know, with high pick and rolls and outside shooting and just quick, efficient possessions. And he fits that scheme so well, just with his screens on offense. And then, like you said, on defense, I've watched every Pitt basketball game aside from 3 where I was on the road for covering other Pitt sports. I've watched a ton of ACC basketball. I'm actually watching it right now here in the corner as we do this interview. I can't think of, you know, 5 guys who have had a better defensive season than Federico in this conference. He should be on the all ACC defensive team. Just the way he blocks shots, the way, and you know, Pitt still gets out rebounded a lot, but it's not because Fede's not doing his job. He's often boxing out 1, 2 guys. The second chances that he created today were incredible. But he's a menace in that paint. He makes it hard for opposing teams.
Look no further than what he did to Armando Bacot. He frustrated Bacot in Carolina as much as any big man I have seen this year. Yeah. That was impressive. That's when you knew he was like on the scene as a defensive player. He is really just kind of coming into his own. And not to be mistaken, I think his minutes, the fact that he has been so kind of dependable, has allowed Guillermo Diaz-Graham to actually grow into his role. And we saw Guillermo Diaz-Graham come in, you know, when Fede Federico had 3 fouls in this game, when they needed just a few minutes from Guillermo Diaz-Graham, really good. I thought Guillermo gave him some quality minutes in this one. He only played about 11 minutes, but 6 points. He had 5 boards in those 11 minutes. Like, when he was on the court, you got to give it to Guillermo Diaz-Graham. He played pretty well. In fact, you know, I don't use plus-minus stats a lot. I don't think they put a whole context into it, but they were +2 with them on the court still. Like, yep. I think that's been something. Fede's kind of minutes and stabilizing of the 5 have allowed Guillermo to grow into that backup 5 that can give you 10 minutes if Fede gets into foul trouble.
Yeah, I think back to the Duke game where Fede got in foul trouble down low against Filipowski and Lively and all those guys that Duke has in its front court, and it forced Guillermo and Jorge to get minutes that they should not have had in that game. I think Guillermo finished like -17 in the plus-minus, and in that instance, I really do think it accurately depicts, you know, how much of a disadvantage Pitt was at in that game when he was on the floor. And he was overmatched. But the stat line that you just said there, where he's +2, 6 points, 5 boards, 11 minutes, that's an A+ stat line for what Pitt needs Guillermo to be this season. It doesn't need him to be 10 and 10. It doesn't need him to block what he blocked 5 shots against Louisville and score 11 points. I mean, if he does, that's awesome. Pitt will gladly take it. You know, you're not going to see Capel crying about it, but they don't need him to be that player. They don't need a ton, but if he can come in for 10 to 11 minutes, make a couple of shots, and a couple of those baskets came at very key times, right to put Pitt ahead right after Florida State took the lead with around 12, 13 minutes remaining. So yeah, he made a couple of big baskets, played great defense, secured the boards, and really just maintained what Federico was doing. And it's really cool to see both of them kind of developing and becoming productive players. As the few young guys actually on this team, they're able to hold their weight as well.
Yeah, I think it's been the key to kind of stabilizing this team. They had the backcourt, but it was like, okay, aside from Henson, who in the front court is going to step up? And the type of front court player Blake Henson is, he can slide down to a 3, really, if he really wanted to. He's kind of got that ability, but he's been stabilizing them in the 4. He was awesome today, 19 points for Blake Henson today as well. But I do want to bring up a situation that could be a little worrying for the future. Jeff Capel did state Nelly Cummings is a little banged up right now. We also saw him come down on a 3-pointer where it looks like he turned his ankle a little bit, but apparently he'd come into this game already injured. So,
right.
Does he now have multiple injuries and what's going on with Nelly? He didn't play the last 12 minutes. I think that there are some stylistic things of why he didn't play the last 12 minutes. Worley was kind of just dominating him. There's really no good defensive matchup for Nelly Cummings in this one with how much length and size that FSU plays with from 1 through 5. But, do you view that as a concerning thing in the future for this team? Because, they do face Boston College on Tuesday. And Boston College, they're not a great team, but they do have the Ashton Langford twins in the backcourt, plus Quentin Post up front. They can at least offer you a little bit of a dangerous unit.
No, I don't think it's reason to worry. I think that, Nelly was getting targeted clearly on the defensive end today, but that's where Nike Sabandi comes in. You have other options. Now, if he's injured and is going to miss time, I think that's a different conversation because you lose, in my opinion, probably the 6th man of the year in the ACC. You make him a starter. It forces JB to take on a true point guard role again, which, he's really good at, but he's better when you have Nelly running the offense and you can allow Jamarius to do different things, maybe be a scorer a little bit and then a facilitator. And it also creates an interesting question where if Nelly is, I'm not hearing anything, but if things get worse and Nelly's not going to be around, I mean, they do have another point guard on their roster who said he was redshirting this year, but he might be available if there's an injury with Dior. This is a guy who doesn't travel to any road games or anything, but he's at every practice. He's on the bench and he is technically available. So I would be interested to see if Nelly or any other guard on Pitt of significance went down, if Capel would give him a shot. He's had some time now to really practice and get his game into gear. And that's an insurance policy that the Panthers do have this year. I don't expect that to ever be activated, but it would be interesting to watch. But on Cummings, Jeff said he came into this game with a little bit of an injury. You definitely saw him uncomfortable after he landed after that 3. And I think the combination of him being a little banged up and him just kind of really getting targeted due to his lack of size on the defensive end, they just said, you know what? No, this matchup calls for Nike. And that's what good teams are able to do. When a matchup puts you at a disadvantage and you have another player that can fix that, that's fine. If he's playing well like he did against North Carolina, they weren't taking Nelly out that game, and this team has the right mentality to handle that. There's no ego. There's no, why am I not out there type guy. It's whatever they got to do to win.
Yeah, I think that is a special kind of thing about this team. You mentioned, they played those 3 guards. They played Elliott, Spandy, and Burton for the last 12 minutes of the game. That's an adjustment by Jeff Capel. No, I've not seen really anyone shout that out. But we're talking about ACC Coach of the Year conversation right now.
Oh yeah,
Clemson is falling down a pit right now. They got blown out by UNC. In Chapel Hill. To be quite honest with you, the way Clemson's going, they're probably going to not make the tournament if they keep going like this. But you look at the ACC Coach of the Year running right now, and it really is Jeff Capel and Kevin Keatts. Just kind of looking at not maybe this game, but also the whole season. How much of an impact has Jeff Capel's just actual coaching ability really elevated this team? Because you look at what he's done in the past 2 years, and it feels like he really is just locking in this year and really helping this team along with what they are doing as well as individual players.
I mean, take a look at Pitt's 3 biggest wins this year. They were losing by 10 plus points in the second half against 3 ranked teams, and they won every one of those games. Coaching plays a factor in that. The adjustment that you pointed out today with with Nelly kind of getting cooked a little bit, he made a schematic adjustment and they found a way to win the game. And then, let's take all the on the court stuff where there are plenty more examples, and let's pair it with the fact that they don't have John Hugley, that when this season started, the program's biggest recruit had landed since Jamie Dixon was here, had a huge off the court problem. And it's a brand new locker room. But the culture that Jeff Capel put in place allowed for this group to stay intact, even after a 1-3 start that followed the Dior Johnson drama. That, the boat never got rocking. Everyone stayed course, and they figured it out. That's so impressive. If he's not the ACC Coach of the Year, I don't know who is. And I mean, again, that could change if Pitt loses out or something. But if this season finishes the way it's looking like it's going to finish, where, Pitt might not finish the year undefeated, with its remaining games. It'll probably lose one or two more. Who knows? But even if it does, if this team finishes near the top of the ACC, if this team makes the NCAA tournament, Jeff Capel deserves ACC Coach of the Year honors, and he should be in the national conversation as well, just for how bad things were and for it to change like that based off of, a great offseason and some great schematic decisions during the season.
Yeah, another one that just came to mind for today, late in the first half with Florida State surging, Jorge comes in with Fede Federico, and the length that Pitt actually has on defense stalls out Florida State while Pitt's offense stalled out. That adjustment defensively with Jorge's length kind of allowed them to disrupt some of the guard movement that Florida State was getting. Florida State didn't get a bucket for the last 3:18 in that half. So that was the lone dry spell of the game for Pitt's offense, but Florida State matched it because I think of that defensive decision by Jeff Capel. I think he's done a really nice job. And I'm totally with you. I think this guy should be the Coach of the Year right now. But you look ahead now. Okay, their last final games, right? Boston College, Virginia Tech, Miami's. Those are the last two quad 1 games. Virginia Tech, Miami. The rest are quad 3, quad 4. How do you see this team finishing out right now? Are you seeing a 15-5 record or a 16-4 record, or where are you looking at?
I don't see this team losing more than one game for the rest of the year. I don't know when that loss is going to come. It could come, in Miami on March 4th. I wouldn't be shocked if it came on March 1st at Notre Dame, just because it's Mike Bray's final game. That's kind of a trap game. They're going to be looking ahead at the Miami matchup, which could determine the ACC champion at that point in the season. And then also the ACC tournament will be coming up right after that. So that could be a tough opportunity for them to lose. Virginia Tech is a desperate team. It's kind of still on the bubble, even though it lost to Boston College earlier this week. But I don't know. I think there's one more loss. I wouldn't expect it to come at home, especially against Syracuse with all the motivation they've provided the program with. But still, I mean, one more loss. What's that finish Pitt at overall? It's 23 wins, something like that.
They're a lock at that point.
And they're probably the ACC regular season champions. If they only lose 4 games in ACC play, it's hard to imagine they don't finish at least tied at the top of the conference standings.
Yeah, to me, I mean, you go 16-4, you win 23 games, you're a lock for the NCAA tournament.
Oh, you're looking at like a 5 or a 6 seed at that point.
Yeah.
I think.
So I look at that and I'm like, I don't care who the loss comes to. If you're 16-4, you're good. I think that 16-4 is probably where they should be if they play up to their level. Now there could be another game where maybe they face one of these teams that's quad 3, quad 4 team. I think the scariest quad 3, quad 4 team that they have left to face is Boston College. I really do believe that. They're getting healthier. I think the Langford bros are good. I like Quentin Post a lot. And he could be a guy that can frustrate Fede Federico enough to get him into foul trouble and face the Diaz-Graham twins. I think that could be a really, really sneaky game where BC comes out shooting the lights out of the building. They had that's just an absolute clunker today, too, against NC State. Easily could completely flip that script. They are a team that runs hot and cold a lot. I think they're kind of the team. When they played Florida State last time and lost at home, Florida State had one of their best shooting days of the year. Some of those threes that they made, especially the last step back 3 Darren Green made in that game, was just unbelievable. That's the type of game I think you can get with Boston College. I don't know if I see that with the rest of these teams, other than maybe, as you mentioned, a Notre Dame team that's kind of playing up for Mike Bray's last game. But I think the realistic expectation, if you're just putting a benchmark on it, 15-5, you got 22 wins, and you're going into the ACC tournament feeling really good about yourself. And I think 15-5 is the mark. You're in the tournament and you are good at that point. So this team continues to kind of just go up. I am shocked. I'll tell you this. Following that trip to New York after they had just lost to VCU and were blown out by Michigan, I am shocked that we are here right now where Pitt, since that game, has only lost 4 games and they're leading the ACC.
And they're doing it without Hugley. That's the other thing. I mean, that was the main thing when we were down there in Brooklyn, eating pizza at John's of Bleecker Street and walking through Manhattan, me, you, and our guy Alex. We were thinking, hey, at least Hugley's back. Like maybe they'll get something from him. And man, yeah, it's a completely different team. It's a complete, and I'm confident. I'm not saying that those losses shouldn't count to Pitt's credit. They definitely should be, held accountable for, because they started the season 1-3, and they also lost an ugly one to Vanderbilt. Like those need to be considered when you look over the overall resume. But if Pitt played those 4 teams that I just mentioned again, I think it handedly wins against 3 of them. West Virginia is always going to be a toss-up just because it's a rivalry game. But the other 3, Pitt would crush Michigan, VCU, and Vanderbilt right now on 9 times out of 10. It's just crazy to me how well this team has evolved once the month of December arrived. It was really that Northwestern win. We thought at the time, what the heck is this team? That had to have been a fluke. No, that was kind of a preview of what they're really capable of doing.
It really was. I think we started to see the makings of this group come together, and I still maintain their best win from top to finish, from just the best game, not their best win, because their best win's Virginia. It's going to be Virginia right now. Yeah. But their best game from top to finish in ACC play against a good team that's not named Louisville was that game against NC State. Yeah. They played a top to finish 40-minute game where they took what a team that is going to be in the ACC, top of the ACC standings, is going to the tournament, and they just took the wind out of the building. Like that was when I was like, okay, this team could be something. I'm shocked that they are here right now, but I'm not complaining about it. But Noah, tell them where they can check your stuff out, follow you on Twitter, all that good stuff, man.
You can follow me on Twitter on my Twitter handle, which is literally right beneath on the video here, @_Noah Hiles is the handle. You can read my stuff at Post-Gazette.com. Not sure if people have heard of that outlet or not. It's only been around for like 400 years. But yeah, you can find all my stuff on that social media platform and at the PG's site. Nick, thanks for having me on, man. This was fun.
Yeah, as always, thanks for coming on, man. This was a great discussion. Good post-game show. Pitt now 17-7. 11 wins in the ACC. Can you believe it? That is crazy. Tied their program record. And folks, we're going to end it as always, as I do here. Thanks for listening. And as always, hail to Pitt.